Guys, welcome to Call to Mind. Today we are going to discuss Bacillus cereus. तो Bacillus cereus को के साथ सबसे पहले हम क्या याद करते हैं, हमें कहाँ से Bacillus cereus याद आता है? Fried rice dishes. So Bacillus cereus is a toxin producing, facultatively anaerobic, gram positive bacteria, motile, beta hemolytic, and most important is spore forming bacterium. So जब भी हम Bacillus cereus को याद करते हैं, फूड पॉइजनिंग याद आती है, और फूड पॉइजनिंग के साथ कॉमनली बिकॉज क्लासिक केसेस रहे हैं तो फ्राइड राइस डिशेस की तो याद आती ही है. कहाँ पे ये होता है फाउंड? कॉमनली फाउंड इन सॉइल एंड फूड. Again, cereus meaning waxy in Latin, so refers to the appearance of colonies grown on blood agar. Some strains are definitely harmful to humans, and we will read about specifically. I want to mention here is a paper, it's a journal where they have mentioned about Bacillus cereus, a volatile human pathogen. Also, there is also one paper in PLOS 1 2018. Bacillus cereus, a serious cause of nosocomial infections, epidemiologic and genetic survey. So they have mentioned the Bacillus cereus is the second most frequent bacterial agent responsible for foodborne outbreaks in France and the third in Europe. And of course, with the nosocomial infections, we are looking at, hospital setting. So where they are discussing about the, systemic infections, they have. So besides food poisoning, Bacillus cereus induces local and systemic infections. And the main which has been described are septicemia, pneumonia, endocarditis, meningitis. Um, and these are especially, they have mentioned these one in immunosuppressed individuals such as neonates, and they have also resulted in the patient death in about 10% of the cases. The environmental reservoirs include air filtration, ventilation equipment, linen, medical devices, hands of the staff. So these are some of the the common environmental reservoirs. So this study basically gives us information and suggests actually the Bacillus cereus stain is able to persist in the hospital environment despite routine cleaning procedures, and at the same time, if it persists, then it is definitely a source of infection for inpatients, because as you know that it has an ability to form spores or biofilms. So that becomes pretty much problem. Well, it looks like the mostly the study have really what it has pointed out to be that the newborns may be particularly sensitive to Bacillus cereus strain, even when there is a low toxin production. So newborn infections is what they're looking at, and another factor would come in is the antibiotic resistance. चलो वी हैड अ स्मॉल डिस्कशन. तो थोड़ा सा हमने ऐसी स्टडी को डिस्कस कर लिया, बट गेट के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से सबसे पहले तो हमको कैरेक्टरिस्टिक पता होना चाहिए बैसिलस सीरियस का प्रॉपरली, कि वो क्या है. ग्राम पॉजिटिव है, रॉड शेप्ड है, facultatively anaerobic, motile, beta hemolytic, spore forming bacteria, and where it is commonly found, soil and food. एंड ये आपको एकदम याद होना चाहिए. एनवायरनमेंट में वो कहाँ होता है, और क्या कहते हैं, हाउ इट मल्टीप्लाई. इट कैन क्विकली मल्टीप्लाई एट रूम टेम्परेचर. एंड सबसे बड़ी बात ये है कि हम इसमें 2 टाइप ऑफ इलनेसेस, पहले हम ट्रेडिशनल व्यू से चलेंगे, जो बेसिकली लिटरेचर में वेरी वेल एस्टैब्लिश फैक्ट है. Short incubation period and long incubation period. So first we are going to discuss the type of illnesses, especially intestinal illnesses caused by the Bacillus cereus. So one is a diarrheal, which is we will discuss right now. बिकॉज़ सबसे बड़ी बात ये है कि जो सिम्पटम्स आते हैं वो डायग्नोसिस में कभी-कभी प्रॉब्लम करते हैं बिकॉज़ दे रन वेरी मच पैरेलल to the the symptoms presented by the other microbes. So let's start discussing. Bacillus cereus का जो food poisoning का है, so two recognized type of illnesses are caused. One is a short incubation and one is a long incubation type of illnesses. जो short incubation है that is connected to the vomiting or emetic type. And जो long incubation है that is connected to the diarrheal type. So ये सबसे important है पहले. तो जो emetic form है, emetic form is commonly caused by rice cooked for a time and temperature insufficient to kill any spores present. So the rice is cooked and then let it sit for several hours at the room temperature. And then maybe they are improperly refrigerated. So it can produce a toxin, um, cerulide, which is not inactivated by later reheating. तो क्या करता है दिस लीड्स टू नोजिया एंड वॉमिटिंग मोस्टली हाफ एन आवर से लेके 5 घंटे तक आफ्टर कंज्यूमिंग कंटामिनेटेड फूड सो व्हाट इट डज इज इट कॉजेज शॉर्ट टर्म बैक्टीरियल फूड बॉर्न इंटॉक्सिकेशंस और ये जो इंटॉक्सिकेशन है इट रन्स इसके जो सिम्टम्स देखे गए हैं this type of food poisoning के they run very parallel to those caused by Staphylococcus aureus foodborne intoxication. तो मोस्टली इसमें nausea and vomiting का रहता है and occasionally you will find as the abdominal cramps or diarrhea may occur. So this is mostly the short incubation form and mostly with the rice dishes. So now let's start about the discuss about the long incubation type. जो लॉन्ग इंक्यूबेशन टाइप है वो आपका डायरियल काइंड ऑफ सिम्टम्स में रहता है सो इट इज़ ऑब्जर्व्ड इन पेशेंट्स एंड इट स्टेम्स फ्रॉम द 3 टॉक्सिन्स एक आपका हीमोलाइसिन हो गया नॉन हीमोलाइटिक एंटेरोटॉक्सिन हो गया एंड साइटोटॉक्सिक के एंड दैट इज़ लोकेटेड ऑन द क्रोमोसोम ऑफ द बैक्टीरिया जो आपका ये लॉन्ग इंक्यूबेशन रहता है मोस्टली देर इज़ एन ऑनसेट ऑफ वाटरी डायरिया एब्डोमिनल क्रैम्प्स हैं पेन occurs 6 to 15 hours after consumption of the contaminated food और nausea may accompany diarrhea but vomiting rarely occurs and symptoms persist for 24 hours in most instances. Again ये mimic करता है symptoms Clostridium perfringens की food poisoning के साथ इसीलिए diagnosis में थोड़ा सा problematic रहता है कभी कभी. So when you're talking about these long incubation and especially the short incubation. The short incubation we are like connecting more with the rice dishes while long incubation mostly is frequently associated with meat, fish, milk or vegetable containing foods after cooking. So mainly जो problem आती है and what when we are going to discuss it very different toxins are responsible for the 2 types of gastrointestinal diseases caused by Bacillus cereus. While जब हम diarrhea की बात कर रहे हैं, it is mainly the enterotoxin, non-hemolytic enterotoxin, hemolytic enterotoxin, and cytotoxin K. So this is how we are going to discuss the toxins. Mostly Bacillus cereus gastrointestinal pathogenesis are considered to be mainly due to the production of toxins. While the virulence factors associated with clinical non-gastrointestinal diseases are unknown, although hemolysin 2 has been shown to allow Bacillus cereus to counteract the host immune system. This is again coming from a study. So mostly all people are considered to be susceptible to Bacillus cereus infection and we do have a study where we have found people mostly the nosocomial infections but mostly the mortality is rare and there has been some cases, where they have shown that the emetic enterotoxin has been found to be associated with few cases of liver failure and death in otherwise healthy people. Most important questions that can come, like what are the two type of foodborne illnesses associated with Bacillus cereus? Like one is, you have to remember, is the contaminated food makes its way to the small intestine where the toxin, is released, and there is a diarrhea, cramps, and sometimes nausea. And usually the vomiting is not present, while in the other hand, where the incubation is shorter, like because with the diarrhea, the incubation is at least 6 to 15 hours, while on the other side, where the vomiting is present and the food is often starchy food, and that was the classically, we talked about the rice. So there the symptom is vomiting, emetic type, Bacillus cereus illnesses, and the incubation period is pretty much half an hour, like 30 minutes to 6 hours. So that you have to remember as these with their toxins as well as these two type of illnesses. टॉपिक इसलिए भी थोड़ा सा इम्पोर्टेंट है और मुझे ऐसे लगता है ऐसे क्वेश्चन पूछा जा सकता है because there was a recent study which was mentioned also in the emerging infectious diseases. अगर आप अपना सिलेबस देखेंगे गेट का जिसमें सेक्शन 8 है जो माइक्रोबियल डिजीजेस एंड होस्ट पैथोजन इंटरेक्शन, उसमें टॉपिक है emerging infectious diseases और ऑल्सो इन नोजोकोमियल इन्फेक्शन तो है ही है। तो उसमें CDC विच इज़ योर सेंटर फॉर डिजीज़ कंट्रोल एंड प्रिवेंशन, उसमें emerging infectious diseases में there has been Bacillus cereus, attributable primary cutaneous anthrax-like infection in newborn infants, India. And this is coming from Assam Medical College and Hospital, India से. And they've been talking about obviously they are ubiquitous in the environment, and but what they are talking about is how difficult is to eliminate these species because specifically because they can resist extreme environmental conditions and thermal treatment because they are endospores, so they are very difficult to eliminate from healthcare products and from clinical settings. And again, the important part, obviously, one, it is a foodborne pathogen, but now this bacterium is also reported to cause several systemic and local non-gastrointestinal infections in immunocompromised and immunocompetent persons. And here what we just talked about one study, and here again we are talking about is the newborns. Going to add a link, so that you can read the study. But how they concluded is the Bacillus cereus primary cutaneous infection in newborns without bacteremia can occur from contaminated environment in hospitals. Bullous lesions or cellulitis during or just after delivery should be included in the differential diagnosis, and caution should be taken in initiating beta-lactam antimicrobial drug treatment. But it's a very interesting study and a lot of information, about, the other side of Bacillus cereus. So all this investigation focused on the labor room and the attached baby room because skin lesions develop within a few hours after delivery. So you can read this study and know more about, the primary cutaneous anthrax-like infection, which has been caused by the Bacillus cereus. Now let's talk about the evaluation. So evaluation, let's go back to our the two illnesses, where on one part what we are going to get is the vomitus, on the second side where the diarrheal is going to be feces. So isolation of strains of the from the food source as well as from the feces or vomitus of a patient. So that is important, and isolation of Bacillus cereus from suspect foods, and confirmation of enterotoxigenic through serology or biological test. So these are something, some initial kind of evaluation, while treatment is symptomatic, and as we said that most patients recover within 24 hours after the symptom onset. While there are severe cases, and again there are other cases when we are talking about the nosocomial infections, but on in general what we are talking about is we are looking more at the food poisoning, mostly seen and in the hospital setup. It's pretty much said that it's a relatively common presentation, and so the nurses and the the practitioners are pretty much familiar. But the only problem, as we said in the diagnosis, where the symptoms can be confused with Clostridium difficile colitis, because the diarrhea is watery and quite pronounced, and while on the short incubation period, where it runs pretty much parallel to the Staphylococcus aureus foodborne intoxication. Again इस एरिया में रिसर्च हो रही है, so we get more and more information. For example, जो emetic form है, जो it has been shown independently by two research groups that they've been encoded on multiple plasmids, especially when we're talking about the toxin. So again, the research is continuing in this area, and we came to know more and more about टॉक्सिन्स एंड अभी जैसे नोज़ोकोमियल इन्फेक्शंस के जो स्टडी थी, इट वाज केम वेरी रीसेंट इन जुलाई ऑफ 2019. I'm going to attach a link, so read about this case. I think it is important. So one thing always remember is the spores survive cooking, then germinate, and the cells multiply when the food is inadequately refrigerated, and the toxins are produced in the food during multiplication. So ये points आपको याद रखने हैं, and especially it is very important that food needs to be contaminated with Bacillus cereus strains that are able to produce toxin, and they must be handled in a way that allow bacterial growth and subsequent toxin formation. So only these toxins are produced. So these toxin, when they are produced in the food, they are resistant to heat. Therefore, it will not be eliminated by most cooking methods. And this is something to remember. Don't forget that it is able to produce spores that are resistant to heat and desiccation. Therefore, it is not very uncommon to isolate from the raw and the cooked foods. And these spores will germinate back into the vegetative form of Bacillus cereus and grow whenever the temperature is favorable. So as soon as the temperature is favorable and there is a sufficient time for it to multiply, definitely there is a foodborne disease that's going to occur, because these strains can produce the toxins, and they can cause both the short incubation or the long incubation syndromes like emetic or diarrheal syndrome. You read the prevention, especially you will come across all the temperatures at what it should be kept, and but one thing we are not going to deal with in detail about that area, but one thing which I want to mention again and again, and you should also always remember, the toxin, once it is produced, especially the emetic form, which we discussed, is commonly caused by the rice cooked for a time and then temperature insufficient to kill any spores, and then improperly refrigerated. So it produces a toxin which is not inactivated by later reheating. So this is something to remember, and there may be some questions. So I mean, if you read through Bacillus cereus, and I'm adding a link to the papers where you can further go in detail about the temperatures and prevention pathogenesis, specifically if you're interested in spore elimination, diagnosis, identification. There's a lot more, information available, and also the new research, with the new research papers coming in, there'll be more and more information added. I'm also going to add a link to US Food and Drug Administration. They talk about Bacillus cereus, and there's a very nice table, where they mention the characteristics all under one roof, right from their features, differential characteristics of Bacillus species, where Bacillus cereus, Bacillus thuringiensis, and Bacillus anthracis, and the whole list is there. And they differentiate by the feature like Gram reaction, catalyst, motility, reduction of nitrate, tyrosine decomposed, lysozyme resistant, egg yolk reaction, anaerobic utilization of glucose, VP reaction, acid produced from mannitol, hemolysis, also the known pathogenicity and the characteristic. I think it's a wonderful table to remember. Everything is under one roof. Also, they also talk about the test for the emetic toxin under the different sections they have mentioned, and it's a very good information that it provides like a the reason is intoxication is caused by the preformed toxin, and this is resistant to acid, heat, and the digestive enzymes. An ingestion of the preformed toxin typically begets nausea and vomiting. So pretty much, the emetic syndrome is caused by the emetic toxin produced by the bacteria during the growth phase in the food, while the diarrheal syndrome is caused by the diarrheal toxins produced during growth of the bacteria in the small intestine.